May 26, 1940. The beaches of Dunkirk, France. Nearly 400,000 Allied soldiers were trapped between the freezing waters of the English Channel and the advancing German army. There was nowhere left to run. Just 2 weeks earlier, the situation had looked completely different. The British Expeditionary Force, alongside French and Belgian troops, had marched into Belgium with confidence. They believed they could hold the line against Hitler's advance. They were wrong. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched an assault nobody expected. Instead of attacking through Belgium as anticipated, German tanks tore through the Ardennes forest, a region considered too dense for armored vehicles to pass. The French High Command had gambled everything on that assumption. It was a fatal mistake. Within days, German panzer divisions broke through French lines at Sedan. They raced toward the English Channel at a speed that stunned even their own commanders. The Allied forces in Belgium suddenly realized they were being cut off from the rest of France. A trap was closing around them, and closing fast. By May 20th, German forces had reached the coast. The Allied armies in the north, British, French, and Belgian, were completely surrounded. Their only path of retreat led to one place, the small fishing port of Dunkirk. General Lord Gord, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, faced an impossible decision: fight on and risk total annihilation, or retreat toward the coast and hope for a miracle. He chose retreat. Soldiers marched for days without proper rest. Many had not eaten in over 24 hours. Exhausted men trudged through Belgian and French roads clogged with fleeing civilians, abandoned vehicles, and the wreckage of war. German dive bombers, the feared Stukas, screamed overhead, strafing the roads without mercy. By May 24th, something strange happened. Hitler issued a halt order, stopping his tanks just miles from Dunkirk. Historians still debate why. Some say Hitler feared the marshy terrain would bog down his armor. Others believe he wanted to save his tanks for the coming battle for Paris. Whatever the reason, this pause bought the Allies something priceless: time. Back in London, Winston Churchill understood the gravity of the situation. If the trapped armies were destroyed or captured, Britain would lose the core of its trained military. The war could be lost before it had truly begun. On May 26th, Churchill authorized Operation Dynamo, a desperate evacuation plan led by Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay from a command post inside the cliffs of Dover. The original estimate was grim. Planners hoped to rescue perhaps 45,000 men before the Germans overran the beaches. At Dunkirk, chaos reigned. Long lines of soldiers stood waist-deep in freezing water, waiting for boats that might never come. German aircraft returned again and again, bombing the beaches and the harbor. Smoke from burning fuel depots blackened the sky, turning day into a suffocating twilight. The port itself was in ruins. Its harbor, damaged and unusable for large ships, meant that soldiers had to be ferried out to bigger vessels waiting offshore. This process was painfully slow. At the current rate, most of the trapped army would be captured or killed before evacuation could be completed. Then came a decision that would define the entire operation. The Royal Navy issued an urgent call across Britain's southern coast. Any vessel that could cross the channel was needed immediately. Fishing trawlers, pleasure yachts, lifeboats, and paddle steamers answered the call. Ordinary British citizens, fishermen, retirees, weekend sailors, sailed their own boats directly into a war zone to save strangers they had never met. These vessels became known as the Little Ships of Dunkirk. Over 800 of them crossed the channel, weaving through minefields, dodging German bombers, and pulling exhausted soldiers from the water. Many of these civilian sailors had no military training. Some were teenagers. They came anyway. Meanwhile, at the beaches, discipline held under horrific pressure. Soldiers formed orderly queues even as bombs fell around them. Officers walked among the ranks, keeping morale steady. There are countless quiet acts of heroism from Dunkirk that were never recorded. Men who gave up their place in line, soldiers who carried wounded comrades for miles, sailors who made trip after trip back into danger. The Royal Air Force fought a largely invisible battle above the clouds during this period. Spitfires and Hurricanes clashed with German fighters far from the beaches, trying to keep the Luftwaffe from finishing the evacuation before it truly began. Soldiers on the ground, unable to see this air battle, often felt abandoned, unaware that fierce dogfights raged just out of sight, buying them crucial hours. By May 29th, the evacuation numbers began climbing. Destroyers loaded thousands of men at a time, ferrying them back to the safety of English shores. Dover's docks filled with exhausted, filthy, shell-shocked soldiers, many missing boots, weapons, or uniforms entirely. But danger did not disappear. On May 29th alone, German bombers sank 3 British destroyers. Hundreds of soldiers drowned within sight of rescue. The English Channel, usually calm blue water, turned into a graveyard littered with wreckage and bodies. Despite the losses, the evacuation accelerated. French troops, initially given lower priority, were increasingly included in the rescue effort as Churchill insisted on solidarity between the Allies. This decision strained resources further, but preserved crucial trust between Britain and France during the darkest days of the war. By June 2nd, most British troops had been evacuated. The rearguard, a small force of British and French soldiers, stayed behind to hold the perimeter, buying time with their own lives so others could escape. Many of these men would be captured or killed in the final days of the operation. On June 4th, 1940, Operation Dynamo officially ended. What began as a plan to save 45,000 men had rescued 338,000 Allied soldiers. It remains one of the largest military evacuations in history. Winston Churchill, addressing Parliament days later, delivered one of the most famous speeches of the war. He reminded the nation that evacuations do not win wars. Dunkirk was not a victory, it was a survival. But that survival mattered more than anyone initially understood. Because of Dunkirk, Britain retained the trained soldiers, officers, and military corps needed to continue the fight. Had those 338,000 men been lost, Britain's ability to resist a German invasion would have been catastrophically weakened. Instead, these soldiers would go on to fight in North Africa, Italy, and eventually storm the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, just 4 years later. The story of Dunkirk is not just about military strategy. It is the story of ordinary people, fishermen, retirees, teenagers with borrowed boats, who chose courage over safety. It is the story of soldiers who held the line under impossible pressure and a nation that refused to abandon its own. Today, the beaches of Dunkirk stand quiet, but the sand still remembers the desperate lines of soldiers, the roar of engines, and the small boats that crossed a war zone simply because they were needed. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We bring you stories like this every week,